If you're considering owning a motorcycle from a European manufacturer like Ducati, for instance, and you make this known to other riders around you, you'll likely be met with opposition from a dad in jean shorts who rides a Versa 650. He'll say something like, "Those European brands don't have anywhere near the reliability that a good old-fashioned Japanese motorcycle does." So you'll go home, log onto your computer, and pull up the Ducatista forums looking for some confirmation bias. You'll find that die-hard Euro boys are saying quite the opposite, that European motorcycles are just quirky and require a special type of owner. So which is it? Are European motorcycles actually unreliable, or do you just need to be a certain special someone to own one? Much of the sentiment of European unreliability comes from an outdated perception of many of the brands, similar to how many older riders still think of motorcycles from Harley-Davidson as being rebranded unreliable crap bikes, even though their build quality has skyrocketed in the nearly 40 years since they were last owned by AMF. Many people still think of motorcycles from European brands in the same way they were perceived in the 70s and 80s, when it was generally considered to be unwise to purchase a European motorcycle in lieu of a Honda or a motorcycle from one of the rest of the big four. During this time, just about every non-Japanese manufacturer was making rickety, oil-leaking, short-lived motorcycles. Many bikes were hand-built in much smaller quantities with looser tolerances and a larger margin for error. Not to mention, many European motorcycle brands were historically quite small and prioritized making high-performance, albeit unreliable, racing machines as opposed to printing out hundreds of thousands of Super Cubs for suburban normies. And then you take into consideration that many of these motorcycle companies were switching ownerships pretty regularly, and you have a recipe for a motorcycle with questionable reliability. For instance, you can't talk about European motorcycle reliability without talking about Ducati. Ducati is always the punchline in regards to reliability jokes, like you roll up to bike night on a shiny new Panigale and some jigsaw squid's gonna say, "Oh man, that's a beautiful bike, it's sure gonna look good in the back of a tow truck." But where does the perception of Ducatis as being unreliable come from? Unfortunately, their track record is historically not great. Even dating back to the 70s when they were designing and prototyping the new Supersport, Ducati had issues with the early models. Because during this time, Honda had strangleholds on the average consumer market, so Ducati's ethos was instead based in speed, innovation, and excitement, which you could say it still kind of is. It is said that the Ducati Supersport was the first real race replica sport bike, and it's hard to be the first at something without having some kinks to iron out. They experienced the same sort of issues with their 851 race bike, and because they were producing them in such small quantities by hand, remember, it was hard to completely eliminate problems in the design. Over time, these quirks became worked out, but it takes a lot longer when you sell thousands of bikes a year instead of hundreds of thousands like Honda. I feel like if there is an issue that has plagued Ducati specifically, it is their constant pursuit of innovation and performance, creating more room for error. On the other side of the same coin, brands like Suzuki use practically the same engine designs for decades at a time, and their bikes are reliable but often considered a bit boring. You can't have your cake and eat it too, you know. So we know European motorcycles were unreliable historically, but let's be honest, like I mentioned earlier, pretty much every non-Japanese motorcycle was unreliable in the past, and that's why practically every brand almost went out of business at least once. So why do European brands still have a reputation for poor reliability, even with today's much higher standards for engineering and quality control? I think a lot of it comes from a lack of understanding on the owner's part. You just can't buy a Ducati race bike and expect it to withstand the abuse that a Honda could. They're not built or designed for that. A super high-performance race machine with incredibly tight tolerances and high stress is just going to require more upkeep than any old Japanese inline four. And I feel like in most public circles, the owners with the worst experiences are going to be the loudest. And when issues do come up with an exotic, expensive European motorcycle, they are not going to be cheap to fix, which further adds to the frustration of the owner. It's like what people would say about the BMW S1000RR when it was fresh on the market. It works great until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you're going to be paying BMW dealer prices instead of going down to any old independent motorcycle shop that services any make of Japanese motorcycle. Another source of frustration for people who own European motorcycles like bikes from Aprilia or KTM is the issue of parts availability. Because these bikes are sold in lesser quantities, built overseas, and typically only serviced by dealerships, of which there are few. It often takes weeks or, as of late, months to receive parts. Meaning you're going to be without your $20,000 motorcycle that you're still making payments on for months at a time if an issue issue should arise, hence the frustration and increasing stigma. Whereas if you have an issue with the Japanese motorcycle, your service will likely be performed more quickly and without the massive cost. But guys, with the year coming to an end and we're starting off a brand new year in 2023, I wanted to do something really special for all my sweet little squids. So to show my appreciation for all of your support throughout the riding year, we're doing a pop-up giveaway to close out 2022. We want to make sure that you're geared up for 2023, so for the first time ever in Yammie Noob history, we're doing a gear giveaway. We've put together a complete kit with a helmet, jacket, riding jeans, gloves, and boots, and we're going to be giving it away to one lucky squid this year. Every piece of gear in this set has been curated by your sweet Papa Yam himself and is guaranteed to get you out there and ready for this riding season. It's a new year, new gear giveaway, but only for this week. Head over to shop.yammienoob.co, pick out anything you want from the site, and you'll be automatically entered to win this complete riding kit. There's no discount code required. If there's ever a giveaway that you do not want to miss, it is this one. One random order in this time frame is going to win, so your odds are pretty high. But time is running out. Go to shop.yammienoob.co and get entered to win. But all that being said, there are some other European brands that have been faced with reliability issues in recent years. For instance, KTM had the notorious head gasket problems in their 390 engines when they were brand new, but since then they have been redesigned and now have minimal issues. Aprilia owners have reported problems with the new 660 models in recent years as well, from small things as simple as mysterious as intermittent check engine lights to outright full-blown engine failures. But most owners have said that any and all issues were addressed by the dealer under warranty without issue. I think the moral is, if you want a motorcycle that is new and contemporary, you should expect some degree of growing pains, especially for a first model year of any new bike. I typically like to wait at least 2 to 3 years for those teething problems to kind of get past. But most companies have no issues servicing these under warranty. That's what it's there for, you know. So is there a finite answer to the question, are European motorcycles actually unreliable? If I had to spell it out plainly, I'd say they are less reliable than a Japanese motorcycle. There's just no denying that Japanese motorcycles are over-engineered to scrupulous quality control standards, and they sell bikes by the hundreds of thousands. But European motorcycles are not inherently unreliable outright. Here are some things to consider if you're looking to buy a European motorcycle. First of all, you need to keep the intended use of these motorcycles in mind. A Ducati Panigale or an MV Agusta Brutale are not really intended to be a daily driver. Like, you're not going to daily drive a Ferrari unless you have the means and resources to care for it, right? They are super high-performance machines that are meant to be exciting, fast, and exotic. If you're buying a super high-end motorcycle like that, you should likely have a Japanese motorcycle in the stable as well to keep you occupied if and when the other bike needs to be serviced. Well, that's not to say that every European bike is as finicky. The Ducati Scrambler or Monster platforms are pretty tried and true at this point, and most owners don't have many issues. I can say myself, I've had very few problems, if any at all, with my Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled that were the fault of the build quality. To be honest, it was me dipping it and dropping it in many off-road conditions, and that thing took it like a tank. I've never had any engine problems with it in over 13,000 miles of ownership. So if you want a European motorcycle from a brand like Ducati, Aprilia, or MV Agusta that is at least likely to have issues, go for one that has been in production for a few years already or is more simple or modest in its design. A highly stressed, performance-oriented superbike is going to require more attention, and without it, it will have problems. This is just sort of common sense. If you insist on getting that new motorcycle with a less tested engine or design, expect it to return to the dealership eventually for warranty work. That's a good segue, actually. If you are interested in a European motorcycle, you should think about the dealer network. For instance, I think there is only one MV Agusta dealership in all of Texas, meaning if you live out in the middle of nowhere, you probably shouldn't get an MV Agusta. If you're buying a bike that is more susceptible to warranty work or specific maintenance, being close to a dealer makes a lot of sense. And you can't cry on the Consumer Reports survey because you had to drive 4 hours to get your motorcycle worked on as if it was their fault you bought a bike from a company that doesn't have a dealer near you. And the last point I want to make is you need to remember why people buy motorcycles from European brands in general. It is because they are unique and exotic and offer a character that you just can't really find in Japanese motorcycles. So if you keep that in mind, you shouldn't have such a terrible experience. You have to know that you are intentionally sacrificing tried and true reliability for the exciting riding experience of a Ducati, an Aprilia, an MV Agusta, or if you get a KTM Duke 890 instead of a Yamaha MT-09, you have to expect that you're taking somewhat of a risk for the sake of the experience experience that comes with riding a KTM. And that usually means just wearing all orange and being insufferable. That is part of the allure of many European brands as well, that despite their reliability issues, countless people still gravitate towards them over Japanese motorcycle because they offer that character and the ethereal feeling you can't get from many of the sterile, mass-produced Japanese bikes. And that's part of the cool factor and exclusivity as well. It's like being in a club full of masochists. What do you think? Are European motorcycles worth the risk of lower reliability for the riding experience they provide? Or are you a K5 Gixxer squid who would never ride anything else? Let me know down below. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Fact: Minnesota has more shoreline than California, Florida, and Hawaii combined. Goodbye.
Keep watching Yammie Noob!